empezar, estamos casi en el tiempo. Si necesitan traducción, por favor.
Before we begin, it's almost time. If you need translation, at the bottom of your screen, you have the globe, the symbol of the world with the word interpretation or translation, and you can choose your language. Lynn will be speaking English, and there will be 3 more languages, French, Italian, Spanish. Before we begin, if you need translation, we have translators today, Italian, French, English, Spanish. At the bottom of your screen, you find the symbol of the world and the word interpretation.
So we are about to start. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us. Once again, thank you for your interest in the formations we try to offer. I'm in Peru at the moment, accompanying my community as well in spiritual exercises, but it's a pleasure for me to be with you today and tomorrow. And also I would like to thank so much Lynn for being with us. Lynn, thank you so much for accepting these 2 days of marathon of formation that we so much appreciate. I don't think we need to say much about Lynn, but I will say some words. She is a sister of St. Joseph of Carandole, and she's licensed psychologist, lecturer, and consultant. She has a PhD as well from the University of New York at Albany. And she has completed a clinical training at the University of Kansas School of Medicine. Many of you know her from other moments, from other formations. She's been very, very busy in the States and around the world with religious life, feminine and male religious life. And she fosters healthy, integrated sexuality, celibacy, relationships, intimacy. There's a long list that I don't want to tire you with. She has received many awards for her work with religious life in the fields of integration, of psychology, of helping us to be ourselves before God. And she has a lot of experience in this field. She works as well with the leadership teams. And is on that note that she's with you. She's been working and collaborating with USG for many years. She's part of the preparation of formators team. She comes every year to be with the formators. And there's so much more I could say, Lynn. Sorry if I don't say everything, but I think that the most important thing is that you are a human being, that you want to be loved by God and allow God to be love in you, to so that you can help us, help others, that we can live our consecrated life in a healthy, in a joyful, in an integrated way, and in a special way today as well, helping ourselves in our leadership roles that are so challenging in today's world. And the title you've given to the formation today, and I will give you the floor, is Taking a Selfie, Emotional Awareness and Accompaniment. So Lynn, thank you so much once again, and over to you.
Thank you. I have a little bit of a cold, so if I have to sneeze or something, hopefully I'll recover quickly. Good to be with you again. Some of you, I see some of the faces that were here before when we talked about accompanying new members. And so we're really continuing today a conversation about accompaniment, and the best way we can accompany others is to really be paying attention to our own journey. And so our conversation is about the role of leadership accompanying all members, not just new members, and the significance of feelings, emotions, as you journey with your sisters. You know, having been in leadership myself, I think sometimes we can get caught up with um, the what we call the temporal issues, finances, buildings, healthcare, and they are important and you will deal with them. We just want to remind you today that relationships are central, and your relationship with your sisters is central. And so we'll focus today on creating an environment of hospitality, belonging, and psychological safety. That's a new topic. We haven't always emphasized that. And I think the reason why I want to start our conversation today with those topics is because I know you want the best for your sisters and from your sisters. So if you want them to live healthy, fulfilling, passionate, happy lives, then everyone, and that includes you, our job is to create an environment that is hospitable and welcoming and safe. And so we'll start with that. And then we will look at emotional awareness. What do we mean by that? Why it is important. And a new understanding of empathy. We're understanding empathy a bit differently than what we learned in the past. And then I'm going to talk about some common ways of dealing with feelings that we all learned because our early experiences were kind of mixed. They weren't always the best with regard to emotions. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about how to be expressing of our emotional life in a healthy way. So we'll talk first about that environment of hospitality, belonging, and safety. When we talk about hospitality, sometimes we think about it as we want to be hospitable to the people we work with or the people who live near us. And we sometimes don't think about hospitality is creating a space within the community for everyone, for each sister, allowing space in the community for them, as I put it here, to come to God in their own way. So each of your sisters is on a very particular journey. And each sister is invited, and we want to support them becoming who God created them to be. And so sometimes I talk about to discover their real vocation, which is who they are, what gifts they have, and how then they can share their self with others, both in the community and in the ministry, in the mission that we partake in. I like Henry Nouwen, one of our spiritual leaders from the past. And here's what he says about hospitality. He said, when we create an hospitable environment, it creates an emptiness with no fear but a friendly place where others can come and discover who they are. Isn't that a wonderful way to think about how we would like our community to be? That each sister can live in that space, in our communal life, and feel a friendliness, not fear, to discover who God is calling her to be. And such an important distinction he makes when he says, we're not inviting people to adopt how we already do things, but rather giving them the chance to discover their way, add to our way, help us become better. And so it's such in line with the whole understanding of hospitality, fits with Pope Francis's call to women and men religious to be about communion. And this is such an important understanding, what we mean by communion. It really means to be one with others without losing yourself. So when we want our sisters, each one to be herself and to be in relationship with each other. So we want them, therefore, we need to create that alternate spaces where she can give herself, be connected, where she can be different, and where she can help others and herself to be free and to love, which is really Jesus's invitation in the gospel. So for you as leader, hospitality is not only to serve and feed, which is part of your role, but I believe it's also to listen so that the other can feel a sense of belonging because she is listened to. So that's a really good question. How do you place yourself in relationship with your sisters so that you are a listener, not just a speaker or someone who tells or talks to? So we have a new understanding of belonging and safety. And notice I'm using psychological safety. The conversation that's happening all around us is about inclusion, including people as they are. But inclusion needs to go one step further. We need to promote belonging so that each sister feels she is important, she can be herself, and she belongs. So inclusion, we have sisters from this community, from this area, from this tribal community, from this. Inclusion is not enough. And so we want to be able to talk about promoting a sense of belonging. And what we mean by that is that each of your sisters feels valued for who she is, being herself. And when we do that, then she can not just survive. We want more than survival for our sisters. We want them to thrive and live fully and freely and lovingly. And so, in order for that to happen, then there has to be an opportunity for vulnerability. And that's a word we need to learn more about, in the ability to be herself when she's not sure, the ability to make a mistake, the ability to say, oh, I forgot to do that. And so critical to any you feeling that you belong, we want you to belong as well, is this whole new idea we're understanding, which is psychological safety. And when you feel safe, or your sisters feel safe, they believe they can be themselves and they won't be embarrassed. They won't be rejected. They will be acceptable, included, being themselves. And so, a few more words about psychological safety, I think, are important because this is something newer that we're talking about these days. So, one of the ways of feeling safe is that you feel that you can take risks, that you can speak up, that you can disagree, that you can say, I'm concerned about this. You can be that honest, and you're not afraid that you will be rejected or that you will feel pressure to keep your mouth closed and not say what you think. And that when something is difficult, you won't hide or pretend everything is okay. And so people can be very vulnerable by speaking the truth as they see it. And it's such an important thing that our sisters be able to share ideas without being judged. And so the other thing that is important for leaders is that you are able to hear feedback. You're able to hear, if you say to the sisters, what did you think about that? That you would hope that they would tell you what they think and offer their honest ideas and their opinions. Safety is also a place where you and your sisters can make mistakes. No one can live this life perfectly without mistakes. So when the environment is safe, you can say, oh, I'm sorry that happened, or I'm sorry that meeting, or I missed that meeting. You can say that to each other as part of the leadership group, but you can also say it to your sisters. When we feel psychologically safe, this is when diverse ideas and perspectives can be brought forward. And sisters, we live in a complex world. We need to think bigger and we need to think differently at times. But if we're not open to hearing, here's another way, or could we think about it this way? If you hear those as condemnation, then you will not allow diversity of opinion to be expressed, and you lose maybe some great ways of moving forward. So belonging helps you and your sisters to live in the present and to focus on what is important and what to be about personally and together. Let me give you an example of what happens sometimes when we are not open, when just something happens in a local community, for example. When a new member comes to a local community, you really have a whole new community. But we sometimes forget that. We think we can go on as we have been living. You know, let's say 5 sisters have been living and you have a new sister. Instead of thinking we have a new community, we say she has to fit in. The 5 of us have a community and she's called to fit in. Really, sisters, when we have a new person come, we have a new community. And one of the things you want to the community is to be open to seeing something could happen in a different way. And so I recently was talking to a community where one of the sisters who was in the original group, she said, I resent the fact. Listen to that word. I resent the fact that this new member wanted us to change something that we have been doing. Wow. Instead of saying we have a new community and we want to hear another idea, someone gets resentful, and resentment can be a form of anger. And so instead of adjusting or adapting, the sister becomes angry and the new sister doesn't feel like she belongs or that she is safe. So how do you help your sisters realize to be more open so that each sister feels she belongs and is safe? For those of you who are following along, we're on page 2, and I'm introducing here how to create psychologically safe environments. And so this is some new work that we're doing where we realize that we can create a culture of safety. And culture is created in the daily interactions. It happens day to day. And when you interact with your sisters, create a culture, and hopefully when they interact with each other. But culture grows. Culture develops in stages. And this is such an important new learning. So the first stage of a person feeling safe is, we call it the inclusion stage. And really what a person asks herself, what a sister asks herself is, can I be me? Can I be my authentic self? That happens not just with new members, although it's a very big question with new members, but it happens every time a new community gathers or a new person joins a community that already exists. There are 2 things that happen in this whole area of safety, and I've listed them there. It's about being respectful, and it's also about giving permission. What a lovely way. What a nice way to think about your role as leader, that you really are respecting each of your sisters, and you want to encourage them respecting each other. And so, what are we respecting in this first step? We're respecting that people need to be included, accepted, and that they belong. If they don't, they can't be themselves and they won't stay. That's particularly true of new members, but it's true of every sister. And so what is the permission? What's the permission you give to your sisters. Be yourself. Be honest. Speak what you think and feel. And you want them to do that with each other, and you certainly want them to do it with you. So then I ask the question, well, how do you promote that? How do you develop each sister's ability to be herself? So the first thing I said is we need to listen more. Sometimes we do too much talking. And that's what needs to happen in a local community when someone new comes. We want to ask and have her tell us who she is, where she comes from, and then we tell her who we are. So notice it says, listen more, ask 2 times as much as what you tell. So one of your big skills as a listener, as a leader, is to listen more. And notice it says, avoid comparing. Sisters, this is deadly when you say, well, you're not as smart as your sister, or you're not as kind as your sister. And we do that, we compare, you know? And so we just want to have each person be herself, encourage her development. We don't need to say she's better than or less than anyone. So if you catch yourself comparing, you want to not do that. So first we start with including. Then we talk about fostering learning. And so the person says, can I grow here? Can I become a better person living in this community? Can I become myself and a better person living in this local community? So notice it's about growing because we respect everybody's need to learn, to grow, and to develop. Nobody comes knowing it all, having it all together. And so we appreciate that they need to learn, and we give permission. Listen to this piece. We give permission to try some things, to learn, and to make mistakes. Wow. We give permission to try and learn and make mistakes. Making mistakes is part of the journey of becoming a true best self. How do you promote that? Well, you share what you're learning. And you can share a past mistake. You know, maybe you're having a one-to-one conversation with one of your sisters. And she said, you know, I made a mistake. I feel terrible. You can say, you know, mistakes are part of what we do on a journey. You could share, if it makes sense, a mistake that you made in the past and what you learned from it. So we talk about mistakes as an opportunity to learn, not as an opportunity to punish. So what are you learning? What past mistakes? And then can you frame good questions? Can you ask, well, what happened that you made a mistake? What happened? And then you ask, what did you learn? What are you taking with you as you go forward so that perhaps you won't make the same mistake again? Notice it's a journey. There are points and the journey continues. The third one is a contributor, being a contributor. Sisters, part of being a human person is wanting to make a difference. That's inside every human person. I want my life to make a difference. And so, can I make a difference in this community? Can I make a difference in this ministry? And so, we want to respect the need for the person to be able to contribute and make a difference in a meaningful way. I don't want to spend my life and nothing happens because I used my energy and my skills. So we respect the need to do something. Autonomy means to do something my way, try it. And it also is, I want to make a contribution. So I offer a different way of thinking about something. And what do? We give permission. We give permission to offer a different way, and we support some independence. You don't have to think the way I think. You can offer a different opinion. You can disagree. Now, we have to help people learn how to disagree in a good way, because sometimes the way a person disagrees doesn't help them, okay? Doesn't help the situation. But disagreement is a sign of a healthy culture. So, how do you promote making a difference, contributing? Well, the first thing you do is you celebrate when somebody offers a new idea. You say, thank you for, wow, and you say, let's consider that. You don't reject, you say, let's think about that. And so you really try to, suggest that thinking differently is a good thing, and offering it in a good way might help the local community or the community in general. So we need to, again, shift from always telling to asking. And we need to help individual sisters identify their strengths. What are they good at? And can we encourage them giving their strengths? And finally, we talk about challenger safety. Can I challenge? Can I ask for change in this community, in my local community, or in the community when the community gathers? And so for you as a leader, are you open to hearing people ask for change? Or do you feel threatened and you say, you shut down, you don't listen, you get angry? So when we talk about the ability to ask for change, you really want to respect that each of your sisters wants to improve what is, that together your community can be better, can respond better to the situations you face in a local area or in general. And you want to give permission to challenge in good faith. Now, when I say in good faith, that means that we help our sisters learn how to say something they'd like to ask for a change, and that they really are asking for a change for the sake of the whole, for the sake of the congregation or the community, not just for their personal gain. So that's what we mean by in good faith. So how can you help? How can you help your community, your sisters, feel free to challenge and ask for change? You encourage, you ask, and then notice it says, speak at the end. Sometimes we speak too soon. And because you are the authority person, because you are the leader, you can prevent your sisters from speaking because you speak too soon. Notice it says, for you to let go of fear. You know, God is with us even at this very difficult time in the world and in religious life. God is still here. And so it really requires us to trust in a loving God, to not let fear take over, and that you show how disagreement can be a good thing. You can disagree with your sisters. You can allow them to disagree, and you are able to consider what is said. And so think about creating a safe culture within your leadership group, with your sisters. Can they be themselves? Can they grow and learn? Can they make a difference? And can they ask for change? So we'll pause just for a little moment here. How are you as leader creating a culture of hospitality, belonging, and safety for every sister? Your new members, your current members, your elder sisters. So how do you see hospitality as part of your mission and ministry as leader? Creating an environment of hospitality, belonging, and safety. So we'll just pause for a moment there. Hmm. Sometimes it can be helpful if you look at what we just talked about and you pick out one thing that you want to take with you. Sometimes it's just one idea that you want to take with you. So you put a little X or a little check mark, just one thing you want to take with you. So the next section we want to talk about is your own emotional awareness. And so we're taking a selfie of your emotional awareness and how important it is if you're going to accompany your sisters. Part of what I know, and you probably do too, is every day you have a whole series of emotions. It isn't one feeling that you feel, but this moment you could feel surprised or peaceful, and in 20 minutes you could feel upset or sad or disappointed. So one of the things we know is we need to be able to live with in ourselves different emotions, to shift from one emotion to the other, depending on the environment, to be flexible, to let go of a feeling in order to be in the present moment with another experience or feeling. And so it really, in order for you to understand and accompany your sisters, you need to understand and accompany your own emotional life. So that's our first part here. So I shared with you, why is this important? What does emotional awareness help you? How does it help you? First, as a human being, and then as leader. I think the first thing I wrote there on the paper was, you recognize who you are. You know, sisters, leadership can take over your life. And you don't want it to take over your life. You want to remain a person in your own right and be leader. So feelings help us recognize what we like, what we don't like, what we struggle with, what we need. So we want to be able to pay attention. They help us understand and empathize, and we're going to talk about empathy with others. In other words, if I understand my feelings, then I'm more likely to understand another's feelings. I can communicate more clearly if I know what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And the reason why I said it that way is sometimes we talk about what we think and we don't realize how we are saying something, because how we are saying has to do with our feelings. So you could be answering a question with a tone, an angry tone, and you think you're doing fine. You think you're answering the question. But if you're not paying attention that you're frustrated or angry, then the tone in which you answer the question sends the message of anger more than the content of what you said. You can make better decisions. Feelings motivate us. Feelings push us. So if you're feeling sad, you want to do something with your sadness, if you recognize. If you're frustrated, you want to do something with your frustration. If you're disappointed, it says, well, you can do something with that instead of just putting on the feeling and doing nothing. We also can understand others better when we understand ourselves better, our feelings. Our relationships can be stronger and more honest. And also, you begin to balance what you think and how you feel. Sisters, to make good decisions, it's usually a combination of what you think and how you feel, and you put them together in a way that helps you to look at the situation more clearly, more effectively, in a more helpful way. So I'm on the top of the next page for those of you who are following along, if you have the handout. And Paula put it in the chat so you can get there in your own language. It's really important that we create a relational space. Now, sisters, I think we can forget this because we're busy about finances and healthcare and buildings and ministry. And we forget that the center of our life is a relational life. And a relational life with each other, with you and your sisters, and with them with each other. So there's a person named Thomas Ubel, and he says, emotions are the relational tissue of life. They are the major connectors, tissue. And so being aware of your inner life, what you feel and what you think. Some of us are better at what we think and we forget that we feel. It helps you to understand what's going on within you and how to respond to the external reality, what's happening around you. So when you feel comfortable, at ease with your emotions, you create a space, a mutual space, where it's okay to feel feelings. So let me say that again. You have the opportunity when you are with your sisters to create a space that says feelings are okay in this space. Thinking is fine and feelings are okay. And so it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad. Only when feelings matter, then we can talk about what to do, how to respond. You know, sister, at one point, one of the sisters I lived with experienced the death of her mother, her own mother. You can't talk about, oh, you know, things will be better 6 months from now. That's a rational thing. That's up here. Even though we know with time, grief does get better. So what we have to be able to do is sit with her when she says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I feel lost. That's where you start. And we go to our heads and we say, oh, 6 months from now, you'll feel differently. No. We have to stay right here at this moment. And that's what my suggestion is. When a person has emotional needs, rational answers do not help. Eventually, we know time helps. But to say time helps now, when she's right there dealing with this tremendous loss, is not creating a space for emotions. So you can accompany others best by creating a relationship where other people feel heard, received, and seen, and you don't ask them to be in another place. You stay with, she doesn't know what to do. She feels lost. She feels overwhelmed. You stay right there. And only then, later, can we talk about some other ways of moving forward. So my real encouragement here is when you are in touch with your inner life, which is especially your feelings, you're able to respond to others with empathy and compassion. And you don't say to them, oh, you'll get over this. You kind of move them away from the difficult feelings of sadness and emptiness. Sometimes we need to sit right there with the sadness and the emptiness. And so when you're out of touch, when you don't realize or you've ignored your feelings, it's hard to see the other. And sometimes what we do is we react instead of respond. We react. We say, oh, it'll be all fine. We kind of push them away from the sadness, the grief. And so that's a reaction instead of a response which helps us to stay with them where they are. And when we react, we separate, we don't connect, and they feel even more lost, separate, like nobody understands. Mm. Mm. Think about your own life. Think about when somebody was not able to support you in the moment, but they were really saying things like, get over it, it'll be better soon, this will go away. That's all ways of pushing and not living in the present. Ask yourself. This is taking a selfie, remember? Ask yourself, do you push away from your own feelings? Do you say to yourself, look, you're the leader here. You can't spend time feeling sad or frustrated, or you have to get on with it. Do you not honor your own experience? Mm. Mm. And so we talk about the importance of learning how to be an empathic person, empathy. To accompany yourself first, to be with yourself, and to accompany others. Being empathic is critical, is so important. So what do we mean by that word? What do we mean by that? Well, it really means that when you meet one of your sisters, you receive them and you appreciate them, her and her story. And this is the new understanding. So try to listen carefully here, and I'll show you what we used to think and now what we understand. Empathy is the ability to understand how she walks in her shoes. The ability to understand how your sister walks in her shoes. To see how she sees things, and very important, how she feels. How does she see things? How does she feel? So we used to think it's empathy was you walking in her shoes. No. You get out of the picture. And what you're doing here is you try through listening first and responding to understand how she walks in her shoes, how she walks in the situation she is facing. I want to talk about the sister whose mother died. She felt sad, and she also felt some guilt because she wasn't able to be present when her mother died. You don't want to say to her, oh, don't feel guilty, you couldn't have known. We use all our rational thinking. We have to understand that for her, in that moment, with the death of her mother, she has mixed feelings: sadness, guilt, maybe some regret that she didn't call her enough. So we don't want to dismiss or say her feelings don't matter. We want to be able to understand how she walks in her shoes. Now, a very important thing. You don't have to agree with her. You don't have to say, yes, you're a terrible daughter, for not calling your mother more often. You don't have to agree. You maybe see the bigger picture, that she did the best she could. And and that she's distressed or bothered. So you stay with her experience. You don't have to agree, and you don't have to take on her feelings. You don't have to feel as sad as she feels. So this is where you can be yourself, and accompany can be empathic. When you truly listen to the other person and you experience, we create a way of walking with, so that they feel okay with those difficult feelings. They feel that you understand just a little bit, and you understand their experience and their distress. And then you can look at what she might do, some possible other responses. So staying with those difficult feelings of sadness and regret and disappointment, you help her live with those and then move beyond those. But you can't say, don't feel that way, you did the best you could. We need to let her experience what she thinks and feels. And then after that, there's an ability to move beyond. So when we talk about being an empathic leader, here's 3 things you want to consider. And you just want to ask yourself, how am I doing? You want to be sensitive. Notice to what the other person is feeling, because empathy has a lot to do with feelings. And you want to understand why she feels what she feels. So if she says, I feel sad, you want to be sensitive and understand why the sadness. If she feels angry, you want to be sensitive that anger is a good emotion. It's not always easy, and why she's angry. If she's frustrated, so we want to stay with and understand. And then we want to understand, look at number 2 there. We want to understand where the feeling comes from. So I use that word, what contributed or triggered the feelings. Why does she feel as she feels? So you heard me say she feels guilty because she didn't call her mother enough. So now you've done 2 things. You know what she feels. You acknowledge that she feels that feelings are not right or wrong. And now by listening, you begin to understand why she feels what she feels. And then the 3rd thing, you communicate to her. You let her know that you have some understanding and that you accept her with whatever the feelings are. It's easy to accept a person who says, I'm at peace and I'm happy. It's sometimes harder to stay with, accept, accompany a person who says, I feel guilty, I feel distressed, I feel disappointed. So we've been talking for a while. I've been talking for a while. So we're going to pause here for a few minutes. We're going to take a short break for you to sort of say, what what's the most important thing that I heard? You are an individual person who is a leader in a very special way. So you want to ask yourself, what was important for me to hear? So, and then during the break, we're going to ask you to just stand up, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do. So we're going to take about 5 to 7 minutes just for a break so you can stop listening and take care of any bodily needs, but also just have a little break to think about what was good for me to hear. So I'm not going anywhere, but we will come back and start talking in about 5 to 7 minutes. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So as Lynn has said, we have a break at 5 to 7 minutes. We'll be back at 7 minutes past the half an hour, wherever we are in the world. Thank you. Don't go anywhere as well. You can just switch off your videos and we'll be back. Thank you.
Lynn, can you just put down a little your camera to frame a little better? You just perfect. Yes. A little more. Okay, perfect. Now it's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Lynn, I think it's time we can resume. It's 7 minutes past, as we said. So, thank you so much, and please do continue.
Okay. So, the next part of our conversation is I've asked myself, who did I learn to be? Who did you learn to be? And what are some of the ways we learn to think about our emotional life, about feelings? I know one thing I always ask is when I work with a lot of folks, formators, people, even new members, novices. I work with a lot of novices. How many of you have heard the term negative feelings? So we hear negative feelings, or that we believe that some feelings are negative. So I'm going to invite you to kind of not use that going forward, that there are no such thing as negative feelings. There are feelings that are more difficult for us as human persons, feelings that are more challenging for us, but feelings are not negative or positive. They are what they are, and they are trying to tell us something about our experience. So you can go forward and not use the term negative feelings going forward, and that's a good step forward. So, what are some of the common ways we learned to deal with feelings? And this has everything to do with what happened in your family, what happened in your early schooling, and even what happened in community life, in religious life. So, one of the things we want to be able to do is to shift back and forth. Depending on what the situation is, we want to be able to feel different things depending on the situation, because we need to be flexible in our emotional response to life. Life isn't only one way. And so one of the things I've learned is that for some of us, you can be afraid of your feelings or be overwhelmed depending on previous experiences. And here's what I mean by that. Sometimes in our families, and we're not in any way putting down parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, but sometimes they didn't know what to do with feelings. And so they expressed them poorly. And that sometimes what we see. So it's often true of anger, for example. Sometimes we saw anger expressed poorly, even physically, maybe a slap or whatever. Anger isn't the problem. It's the poor expression of anger or frustration. Or maybe we could talk about sadness, that instead of being able to be sad, you might have learned in your growing up in school or whatever, someone may have said to you, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. So in other words, crying, which is often a sign of sadness, it's one sign of sadness. So you learn you can't be sad. You can't cry. And we learned that anger is expressed in negative, poor ways. And so we see, people don't know how to handle difficult feelings. And so you push them away. You say, I'm not going to deal with them either. Or another learning is someone perhaps blamed you for their feelings. So have you ever heard anybody say, you made me angry? She made me angry? She made me frustrated, right? Now, what we now know is I can't make you feel things. Other people don't make you feel things. Yes, they do or say something, and you respond with feelings, but the feelings are yours. So when somebody said, "You make me so angry," you want to be able to realize your anger is a response to something they said or did, but they didn't cause it. And we're going to explain that a little bit more. So I think we sometimes are overwhelmed or frightened by feelings because people didn't express them well. People were not able to regulate. They over exaggerated a situation, or people blamed you for what they felt. And none of that is helpful to us. So I think it's really important for you to ask what you experienced at home and growing up, and to realize it becomes a part of you, and that you begin to think that's the only thing that can happen with feelings. And so if you felt connected and supported when you were feeling sad or frustrated or disappointed, then you learned feelings are good and you can express feelings, and they are a positive part of your life. And listen to this, you feel safe with your feelings because you were in that environment where feelings were okay, and you could, no matter what the feeling, you could feel them and express them. This is often not what happened. And it's not what happened because our parents, even our teachers, they didn't know what to do. And so sometimes when feelings became expressed, or feelings that it was easier to push them away, to not deal with them. And then we learned that therefore it's not okay, and we call detached. So we practice not feeling, pushing them away. And then as adults, we have more difficulty saying, what am I feeling? What are my feelings trying to tell me? And what am I going to do? So the other thing we've learned, and I want you to again think of your family, and we're not judging. We're just kind of taking an honest look at what happened in your family, what happened in your school, what happened in religious life, even up till now sometimes. Inappropriate behavior and or addictive behavior are some of the ways that people learned to cope with stressful, difficult feelings. I didn't say negative, but stressful, difficult feelings. And so what happens when we have a feeling that's difficult, we can get what kind of behavior do we get? Busy. So we overwork so we don't feel. Or we overeat so we don't feel. Or we use a substance other than food. One of the things we understand about the use of alcohol, maybe in your own family, sometimes in the community, is alcohol numbs, gets in the way of our feeling because we didn't learn how to experience difficult feelings. And so addiction to work, to busyness, to food, to alcohol, to whatever, are sometimes to cope with stressful situations. And so another thing we do is try to avoid, I don't want to feel that stuff. And so we distract ourselves. So sometimes we're numbing, and sometimes we're distracting ourselves. So how do we distract? Well, sometimes we watch TV. Or now we have these phones, you know, these are more powerful than any TV. And so we get on our phones and we spend too much time on our phones, which can distract us. Sometimes we engage in fantasy. We just kind of daydream about a different life, or we read novels and we kind of place ourselves in a fantasy world. And so there are ways that we use to distract ourselves. And I forgot to say computer games or all kinds of just doing too much on our cell phones, etc. So part of what we want to understand is we've learned to do some things with our feelings that are not helpful. Numbing them, distracting ourselves, blaming others, those are things that are not helpful. And so we don't benefit from our emotional life. We really push it aside. Another thing I watch sometimes with some of our sisters is they learn how to have one emotion and they use that one emotion for everything. They feel comfortable with that emotion, even if it's not helpful. I once had a provincial call me on the phone, and she said this to me. She said, one of our sisters, I'm worried about her. I said, okay. And she said, no matter what the situation she's in, she's angry. No matter what. And so she said, my experience of her is no matter the situation, anger is what she feels. And because she feels angry most of the time, now there's nothing wrong with anger, but because she feels angry most of the time, other sisters don't want to live with her. Some sisters are afraid of her. They don't understand where she's coming from. And this provincial said to me, I don't understand. She said, I don't know what to do because no matter what happens, the only feeling she expresses is anger. Wow. So we say, well, how do you understand that? Let's say one of your sisters is angry a lot, most of the time. And you say, wow, what do I do? How do I respond? Or another one, do you ever, well, let me talk about anger for a minute. Sometimes it's easier to be angry than it is to be sad or to be fearful. But if the only thing a person shows us, a sister shows us, is anger, it's pretty hard then to be compassionate or be empathic because anger pushes away. That's what anger does. So if you are angry a lot, you push others away. There's nothing wrong with anger unless it's the only response that you have. Here's another response that people have, sisters have, that isn't helpful. but it doesn't seem to be as negative as, or as difficult, I should say. And that is someone who constantly jokes about situations, or, you know, says, you know, oh, that's not so bad, or I've lived with worse, you know. So they constantly cover up the difficulty by joking, by saying, oh, that's not too bad. And so again, they push away real feelings. And it's one thing when they say about themselves, oh, this isn't so bad. But what happens when they say to a sister they live with, and she's having a hard time, and they say to her, oh, you'll get over it. You'll feel better next week. You see what happens? They don't honor her experience. And when you don't honor someone's experience, then they can't connect with you. They feel pushed away and not heard, and there's no empathy. So, one of the things about only having one emotional response, you don't come across as real. And people, your sisters, are going to have a hard time feeling connected to you. The last point I wanted to make here in this section was to say, we also, this shutting down intense emotions. Sisters, emotions have degrees. You can feel a little, more, or a lot. So there's intensity of emotions. Everything isn't, you know, like anger. You can be annoyed, frustrated, disappointed. They're all in the angry family. Or you could be outraged. You could be just outraged. Outraged is at the end, way over here. But, you know, annoyed, disappointed, that's over here. So we have to deal with different intensity. And we don't want to treat a lesser intensity with the biggest response we have, when that would be with outrage. So again, shutting out intense feelings, food, alcohol, overwork, mind-numbing behaviors isn't helpful. We want to be able to deal with whatever the degree of the feeling is. So let me stop for a minute. And I'm asking you to do a selfie. Okay, you know what a selfie is. And the selfie here is, what was it like growing up in your family? And we're only looking at emotions. What was it like growing up in my family? Did people express emotion? Could you feel different intensity? Some little things, and then some things were really big, or was it always really big? Were some feelings called negative and you weren't supposed to feel them? You know, anger in women, sometimes women are not supposed to be angry, yet it's a feeling that happens. So taking that selfie, what was it like growing up in your family? And can you just be honest with yourself, saying, we didn't do too well with feelings. We never talked about feelings. You kept your feelings to yourself. Or in my family, sometimes feelings were expressed in a difficult way. So I'm afraid of feelings. And then I'd ask you to, what did you learn at school about feelings? What was your experience at school? You're doing that selfie now. And then finally, what's been your experience in religious life? You know, sisters, we weren't very good in the beginning, at least in my earlier days in religious life. You know, we never talked about feelings. And in some ways, I don't think we were encouraged to feel, understand, accept, and express. Listen to those words. I don't think we were encouraged to feel, understand, accept, and express. And yet, feelings are an integral part of every human life. So I think we all have something to learn here, don't we? And we're not judging families or schools or early religious life, but I think we all have something to learn because we haven't done the best job of incorporating feelings into what it means to be a human person. Am I right? You see a little heads nodding over there. Yeah, right?
Yes, Lynn, you are so right.
Right.
Shall I suggest that we can have 2 minutes because the questions you've asked are so important and the content you've shared is so important. I would ask for 2 minutes of silence
Sure.
where we can really take this selfie without judging, without blaming, just being. So we take 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn, for your words and for this time of silence. Over to you again.
You know, I I work with novices all the time, and as a matter of fact, I leave on Sunday. Whoops, to work with a group in St. Louis, Missouri. And one of the questions I ask them is, "Who did you learn to be?" And then I ask a second question: "Who are you called to be now?" And that really is the journey of every one of us. And in particular, with regard to our emotional life, who did you learn to be? And now, who are you called to be? And to be emotionally more able and to understand this part of your life and the life of your sisters is an opportunity. So I'd like to talk about making friends with your emotions. I think sometimes people think, oh, I'll be exhausted if I connect with my feelings. And that's because we usually think of feelings as intense. We often think of the intense feelings, but feelings can be mild and just a hint of a feeling, and then they can be very intense. I think most feelings will come and go unless you sit there and kind of obsess about it, unless you keep focusing on it. And then it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm angry and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so part of what we want to be able to do is understand, to notice, to accept, and then to let them move through us to bring us back to the present, which includes many things, not just this one emotion. I think core emotions, core, important, significant, anger, sadness, fear, surprise, joy. These are core emotions that we want to be able to feel and express and help our sisters to feel and express. Also, I think your body is an instrument that carries feelings. So, if you're having a hard time swallowing, and I'm not talking about a physical issue, and that's where you hold your anger is all caught in your throat, you get like a rock. Or if your stomach is upset and you're having all kinds of stomach issues, because that's where your feelings are been shoved there. So we want our bodies to be aligned with our emotions. We want to understand them, but we don't want to store our emotions in a particular part of our body, like tense muscles, gut issues, headaches, throat, we can't swallow. So sometimes our bodies are crying out, trying to tell us, wait a minute, pay attention. What's happening? Don't store these feelings. And sometimes people say, I've heard sisters say to me, I just put away the difficult feelings. I don't deal with them. You can't put away or not pay attention to some feelings and think you have the ability to pay attention to others. If it's like you're shoving down the difficult feelings, you shove down the ability to feel all feelings. So we want to be able to deal with those difficult ones, the challenging ones, and the positive, what we call the easier emotions. And finally, sometimes sisters say to me, I understand, it's a good question. They said, look, we're rational people. We don't want to throw away our logic and reason. Absolutely true. We're not asking you to not be thinking women, but finding a balance between what you think and how you feel. And here's the critical thing: using thinking and feeling in your decision making. Let me say that again. We don't want you to be irrational and just the only thing that matters are your feelings. What you think is important. What you feel enlightens your experience. They are important. And good decision making involves thinking and feeling and thinking, not one or the other. So I invite you to think about, even as a leadership group, on what basis are we making decisions? Yes, logic and reason, for sure. And how does this impact our sisters? How does this impact the community? How does this impact? So we're always looking at thinking and feeling and doing some kind of a balancing work of using them both. So, what do you do with feelings? And I'd like to use sadness in particular as the example here. And tomorrow when we come back, I'm going to use anger as the example. But notice my 3 suggestions. What do you do with feelings? The first one is name the feeling accurately. If you're sad, you want to be sad. If you're frustrated, you want to say, I'm frustrated. If you're disappointed, you want to be disappointed. If you're peaceful, you want to be peaceful. So name accurately what you feel. Now, one of the things that we've learned to do, at least some of us, is we use anger to push away feelings. So we think we're angry when underneath there's really tremendous sadness or disappointment. So that's why it says name the feeling accurately. The second one says, discover what the feelings are trying to tell you about your experience. So another way to say is feelings have information to help you with what's happening and with decision making. So let me say that again. Discover what the feelings are trying to tell you about your experience. They are messengers. They have a message. So if you know what the feeling is, then you ask, what's the message? And then finally, express appropriately. Now, sisters, it's really important that expression be a part of the journey. What we've learned to do is depress, shove down, keep within. And so, sisters, we have more depression in women than we do in men because we shove down. We don't allow feelings to be okay and to teach us. There are many causes for depression, but not expressing can be one of them. Okay, so far? So let's look at sadness. Let's look at sadness. So what if you said to yourself, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling very sad. My sadness, I feel overwhelmed with the sadness I feel. Or as the sister whose mother died, I just overwhelmed. I don't even know what I feel because of this. And here's the word you want to hear: the loss of my mother. So, sadness, that's the answer to question 1. What's the message when a person feels sad, when you feel sad, when I feel sad? What we're talking about here is loss. Now, when it's a death of a person, it makes sense, doesn't it? She feels sad about the loss of her mother. She feels sad because her mother is no longer here. I feel sad when my parents died. Yes. But loss, which is the message of sadness, loss can be about many things. Let me give you some examples. Loss can be related to poor health. Some of our sisters, and us, we have some health issues. And so we can feel sad and not realize it's connected to some poor health. The loss of a friendship because one of her sister friend dies, or her sister friend moves across the country and they no longer live together. So the friendship may not be ending, but their everyday connection is ending. Loss of companionship. Loss of hope. Sisters, this is a big issue in our world today. People are feeling hopeless, loss of hope. And that can bring a tremendous amount of sadness. And really, we are called to be hopeful women, to be a sign of hope, even in the midst of our own declining, our own difficulties. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about hope tomorrow before we end. Loss of stature. You know, maybe I served as a principal in a school. And my next mission, I'm not the principal. I'm one of the teachers. Do you see the loss of stature, the loss of being the one with the power, the being the one in charge? And now I'm one of the sisters. These things take time to understand that sadness can come from a change in position, a change in health, a sense of hopelessness, a change in companionship, or even the loss of something material. You know, you loved the mission you were in, and you're asked to go to a new mission. For you as leaders, what have you let go of to be the leader? What did you leave behind to be the leader? I think we forget that you also leave behind things that were important to you. Of course, death is one of the biggest losses that any person faces. And so one of the things we want to be able to do with sadness and loss is not blame someone, and that can happen, blaming someone for the loss. And when we blame someone for the loss, the feeling that we substitute for sadness is anger. Let me say that again. It's easy to blame someone for the loss. And when we do, we substitute anger instead of remaining sad because we are dealing with loss. And so I think it's such an important thing to realize that sadness is such an important feeling. It is one of the hardest feelings for human persons to embrace. And it is part of the grieving process. And we're going to talk a little bit more tomorrow about grief being more than sadness, but it includes sadness. So, what I'm suggesting here is how important it is that whatever the feeling, that we name it for what it is, that we discover what the message is. So remember, sadness is about loss in some way, and that you express it appropriately. Appropriate expression does not mean I give you my feelings. I come and I pour out my feelings all over you, or that I blame you for my feelings. And so learning how to express feelings to whatever degree they're in, a little bit, mildly, to outrage. It's okay, you can be outraged, but what do you do? How do you express that kind of powerful feeling? We have to do it appropriately, where we don't hurt others and we are able to be ourselves. So to end today, and we'll have a little time if there are time for some questions, but just some questions for you to take with you. Are you comfortable with whatever feelings you feel? Do you tend to avoid certain feelings? Sadness, anger, fear. And then I ask this question and I have a suggestion. What will help you notice that during the day you have the potential for many feelings, a variety of feelings? So a suggestion I'd offer, and I try to do this myself, is to take some time during the day to do what I call a feeling check. A feeling check. So, what's an easy time to do a feeling check? Most of us eat 3 times a day, more or less. So, what happened wherever you are, if the next meal is lunch or breakfast? Let me talk about my time because I'm here. My next time to eat is lunch. What if I just took a little pause and I said to myself, okay, Lynn, what kind of feelings were you feeling since breakfast? So we're only looking at a very short period of time, breakfast to lunch. What was I feeling? Can I name them? Can I accept? Can I honor? Can I try to understand? And then what did I do with the feelings? And then at supper time or dinner, you look from lunch to dinner or supper and you say, where have I been emotionally? And you write them down. Sometimes a little journal where then you begin to see how you repeat feelings. Or you don't allow, maybe you only allowed a couple of feelings when you have a bigger life. And then the same thing at breakfast the next day. You say, what's been my emotional life since dinner the night before? If you did that, even for a period of time, even if you did it for a couple of weeks, you'd begin to see your emotional life more clearly and to begin to understand your invitations. What am I feeling? What's the message? Am I expressing them appropriately? So, an invitation to take with you, maybe even to practice from today till tomorrow when we gather again. So, Paula, we have a few minutes. I'm not sure if we can handle, they might ask the question in the chat or if they raise their hand, then maybe I'd have an opportunity to respond to a few questions before we end today. You think we can do that?
I think we can do that. So I would suggest if we have, again, 1 or 2 minutes to just recall what you just said about making friends with our emotions, to name them, discover them, express them. This idea that I think it's very important of this feeling check at meal times. So if we have 1 minute and if sisters would like either to raise their hands or to write their questions in the chat, that will be welcomed. So we just pause for 1 or 2 minutes and then we resume.
So any either comments or questions about what we have shared today? And it could be about the beginnings part about hospitality, belonging, safety, or this part here about how critical emotional understanding helps create hospitality, belonging, and safety.
So, Lynn, we have one raised hand from Marianne. I would ask Marianne to open her mic if that's allowed. Florence, please. And to be brief, please, in your comment and your question. Please, Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. This has been very helpful. I'm fast approaching my first visitation to our German province. The majority, as probably in many of our congregations in Europe, are elderly, significantly elderly, 80s, 90s. And I was particularly focused on the beginning of your presentation. And I think I'm thinking in particular about meeting with the local coordinators of those sisters and creating an environment of hospitality, belonging, and safety. I think the world of many of our elderly sisters, simply because of health, sometimes health challenges, diminishment challenges, can be a little narrower. I think many do a wonderful job of, keeping track of world happenings, etc. But just trying to be brief, would like to hear you comment a little bit more in that particular setting when dealing with a majority of a local community, the leader of a local community that's elderly, experiencing maybe health issues, etc. Thank you.
Well, a couple of things strike me right away, Marianne. One is understanding the intercultural difference here, not to put people in a box or stereotype, but, I lived with a sister from German descent. They seem to be support or encourage more their rational self. So the whole idea of emotions is probably a bit foreign or a bit less practiced. Let me put it that way. I also think it's not just the German part of thing, but it's religious life previously. Religious life, expression of emotion was not a high priority. And so not knowing, first of all, not valuing it, not realizing how important they are, not realizing they're operating all the time, and being not practiced becomes a challenge. So one of the things that you might be able to do is, I think this is where modeling some of the what you would hope they could be about will be important, that you do it yourself, you show it, and that somehow, and especially for the leaders there who are they're the people at the front line, if you want to put it, to get them aside and to say, look, here's what we know now. This is such a challenging area with diminishment and all that's going on. How can I be helpful to you? How so that you, and doing that empathy thing about, inviting and asking and listening and noticing any, the hesitations they have and the emotions that they are holding. So I think don't underestimate modeling, being able to use your empathic self, ask and try, even though it may take a little bit of silence, listen as carefully as you can and keep asking. And then the culture piece, certain cultures are much more rationally oriented. I think the Germans are, and it is a gift that they give. At the same time, they're a little short, potentially short. I don't want to put them in a box.
Thank you very much, Lynn, Marianne, for your question. Lynn, there's some questions online on the chat. So one of them in Italian says, how can we recognize and replace, I think that's the question, these masked negative feelings within us? I think there's many words here that can call your attention, please.
Well, the one thing you can do as of today going forward, do not label feelings as positive or negative. They aren't. They're difficult, and the difficult feelings are the ones that, you know, we can say is sadness, disappointment, anger. They're difficult for us. We like peace and harmony. So the first thing you can do is do not label feelings as negative. They aren't. They're just more challenging for us. So if we can get a positive framework that all feelings are important, they all have a message, how to approach them is really step number one. The other part of the question I'm trying to think is
replace. How can we replace those negative feelings, which you already said that they are not within us? I think the word here is replace. Can we replace them? How can we do that?
You don't want to replace them. You want to name them and listen to them and get their message. Because the more we replace, the more we push aside, the more then we believe that they're not okay. When all feelings have an opportunity to teach us about our experience. So don't replace them, honor them, learn from them, accept them. And once you do that, it takes away the power of some of these intense feelings.
Continuing from that, there's another question that says, how can we do that in community? So if emotions and feelings are not to be judged, then how do we build community consensus to know how to manage together and not victimize others or victimize ourselves in our daily life relationships?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing is, it's to say is we have to do some more education. We really do. We have to educate ourselves, which is what you're doing while you're here. What a great choice you've made to educate yourself. And then I think we have to educate our sisters. I think we have to say, at this time in the history of life, of religious life, of understanding what it means to be a human person, which is what we're talking about, emotions are a part of our life. They are significant, and we want to be able to understand the gift that they bring and learn from them. So you do need to do communal education. I also think practice, and I know that these sound like they're so simple. It's not. We have to practice being able to express emotions, and sometimes it's going to be messy. So we just want to say, okay, so she didn't express her frustration in the best possible way. Can we just say, at least we heard it? Let's deal with the frustration, and then we can move forward. How could she have expressed it differently? So I think education, practice, and you modeling it. When you can say, I'm frustrated, disappointed, and you don't lose it, and you can offer a way of looking at it. So those are some of the things. So don't downplay the need for education about our humanness. Sisters, really, our humanness is where we are bumping up against each other. And teaching, learning about this significant part of us is critical.
Thank you, Lynn. Following from there, I think there's another question that complements this. In case of people or persons who tend to consistently see themselves in and express stressful emotions, should there be a shift from empathy to challenging them? And if yes, when? So the balance between empathy and challenging, how does that happen?
Well, it's always, these are profound questions. And I think one of the things is, here's a little rule that you may want to keep in mind. And that is, people repeat things because they don't feel heard. People repeat things because they do not feel heard. So even though you may think, well, we've heard this before, she's just saying the same thing over and over again. What if you were to really focus in and to say, even something like, you know, this is not the first time I've heard you express disappointment. Tell me more. So I kind of keep going with listening, empathy, because it may be true that she does not feel heard. Now, if you do that 10 times and she still, and then you say, you know, you got to help me here because I think we've stopped to hear, and yet it doesn't seem to be enough for you. So sometimes we have to name the reality honestly, you know, but I would think about, have I listened enough? Does she see that I have some sense of what it's like for her? And I would go there first, and then after a bit, then you might say, help. I think we have to be as honest, help me out here. I'm trying, you know, because it seems like we're having the same conversation again. You got to help me because something isn't working. Notice how honest it is. You know, I mean, you're just saying, you know, help.
And I think we need to ask for the gift of respectful sense of humor. Sometimes it really helps as well. It's a gift, it's a grace. So there's a comment that I think you've touched it, but probably you'd like to underline. The loss of members, death in the communities, or the mission that comes to an end. The challenge is to accompany them to the end. Our average age is currently 86. So what would you like to say, Lynn? I think this is a very important reality in many of our communities.
Yes. And I think a couple of new insights might be helpful. Loss is very personal. So the loss of a mother house to the sister who built the mother house is different than the sister who only lived there a couple of years. So loss is quite personal. That's number one. The other thing is what we're learning is we have taken on grief as a personal issue. I do this, my grief, I do it by myself, when really grief is also communal. So the people working in the area of grief are challenging us to do something more together. It's both personal and communal. So how do we understand the personal part of it, but how do we grieve together? We are relational people. Doing it by myself is what they're telling us, these folks who work in this area. It isn't enough. So that's why we need ritual. We need the ability to lament together. I once worked with a group who was letting go of a bunch. They each wrote lamentations. You know, the laments are the major part of the Psalms. There's a little outline of a lament. They wrote their laments and then they shared them with each other. What a powerful experience. Personal and communal. Personal and communal. Look up the elements of lament. See how that might be part of your journey. It's one of the hardest things we deal with, loss.
On that same note, thank you so much, Lynn. One of the sisters, you've touched it, how sadness sometimes, because it's not felt, leads to anger, to rage. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's one of the most noble feelings we have, but one of the most difficult, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's what anger does or can do. And maybe it's why we learn to go to anger instead of saying. When you really are experiencing sadness and loss, you're very vulnerable. It's a vulnerable place. When you turn that into anger, anger does two things. It pushes you away from your vulnerability. So you have some sense, not real, but some sense of I'm in control. You're really not, but it does give you that sense of a little bit of power. And not only do I push away from my own experience, but I push you away. So now it's a disconnect. So anger disconnects me from a vital part of myself and you. And then that gets us into serious trouble. So sadness, loss, vulnerability, learning to be vulnerable. That goes back to, is the environment safe enough for me to be vulnerable and not to come across as I can handle this, or, and push away my own vulnerability.
Thank you, Lynn. That was very clarifying. Thank you so much. There's a couple of questions, changing a little bit the subject, about the superiors generals, which many of them are here with us. What happens when a superior general that wasn't sad by nature, but somehow becomes sad, and she doesn't really know where that sadness is coming from? So here we are taking a selfie, but how, as superior generals, can we help ourselves, allow others to help us, realize that sometimes the load of the service, of the responsibility we carry, can be very taxing emotionally? How to deal with all that?
Well, I was the superior general, so maybe I can speak from experience.
Please.
It can be a lonely job. And depending on how you work, I happen to work in a team, but it can be a lonely job, and you feel it's all up to you. So one of the things I would absolutely encourage, have someone that you talk to. And it can't be someone in the community. It might not even be someone on the team with you, because the issue may involve them. So my encouragement is, have a consultant that you work with. I have accompanied superior generals. I've accompanied provincials, novice directors. You need somebody that you can speak the truth to. And in particular, you're trying to sort out a sadness that it isn't, maybe it's not your strong suit. You probably have been more of a thinker than a feeler. So you need some support in general, but you also need some support who can help you open up that door of feelings and of sadness, etc. And it can be life challenging, but life-saving for you. Life-saving for you, because you incorporate another whole part of what it means to be you, fully human, fully functioning. So find someone that can be your companion and who doesn't have any interest, is about being a coach and a help to you.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for those words. On the same line of superior generals, the ones who leave the service, who end their mandate, how can we help them, or what strategies need to be put in place so that they can deal with all the process? Because it's a difficult moment. Sometimes it's a relief moment. Different people live it in a different way. Please.
Again, I don't think we do more work helping people become leaders than leaving leadership. So I think that's a recognition we need to say, that leadership changes you. It impacts your life. And then you're called to let go, and we don't pay attention to the fact, what's it take? What needs to happen for you? When I was at St. Luke's, the Institute, we did a program. It's called Surviving and Thriving. leaving leadership. So we need to focus more on the fact that taking on a role, you learn some things. I work with LCWR here in the new leaders workshop, but we also have to deal with the other end, letting go and leaving. And there are things that we know, in particular, how to process some of your experiences and some of the feelings and some of the way you were treated and some of the gifts. So we look at gifts that came from that time. We look at some of the difficulties. And why? For you, the real thing is for you to be able to let go of leadership and be your best self. That doesn't happen by just shutting the door and walking away. It's an emotional, psychological process that only people who've been in leadership understand. So we can't expect all your sisters to understand because they probably don't. So, but it is something, we do know some things about how to help people leave leadership, and we ought to be doing more of it. And you shouldn't be doing it by yourself. So we work in small groups of 10, 15 leaders and how they helped each other. There's a lot of wisdom among you if we can get you together.
Thank you very much. That's a formation that I've been thinking for a long time. So how to help and accompany leaders who leave. So probably next year, because this year is already, we can do a follow-up on that one. It's so important. It's so important to learn how to start things and also to learn how to end and hand over and let go. And often in conjugated life, that's not easy. Right. I don't see any more questions. Sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
Just one last comment on that. Beginnings and endings matter. That's really important. The beginnings and endings, both of them matter. And one of, I think, the big challenges is in the endings that we have not done enough support to endings. And one of the saddest experiences that I've had in working with leaders and women is women who never leave leadership. It is painful for them and it is painful for their community because they never leave. And therefore, life cannot go on because they can interfere. So, very important, beginnings and endings.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. Another question just popped up. How to accompany and empathize with sisters that always feel they are victims and they place outside the causes of what they feel. How to balance what it is to be authentic with each sister and also what is the common project of the community. That sometimes implies that people need to welcome things that probably they wouldn't choose if they would just listen to their feelings. So I think it's a twofold question.
More than twofold. I think that, this is where we need to know the individual sister's story. Sisters, many of our sisters were traumatized before they came to the community. And so some of them live out of a trauma perspective. And that's where some of the victim stuff comes from. So we're learning, I'm doing some specialized training in trauma to understand how trauma gets played out in the current world, in the current life, when it was something from the past. So I don't think I can say more except here's a question you may want to consider. What does the sister get by being a victim? What does she get? Your attention? People feeling sorry for her? Not taking responsibility for her life? What does she get? And how does she learn to get something that is better for her instead of getting irresponsibility, blaming other. You understand? So people behave for a reason. What is she getting by taking on the victim role? And how can you help her have a better relationship with others and her life by not being a victim? So sometimes we reward victimhood and it keeps it going. That's complex. It's a complex response. And also the whole question of trauma, where people come from, we need to learn a lot more.
Thank you, Lynn, for opening again the horizon. Sometimes there's not only one way to go, but this. And how to balance our being authentic with the common project of the community, when sometimes that can be a conflict or it's not easy.
Right. Right. There's always the individual good and the common good. So as leaders, you're trying to do both. Respond to the individual and to the common good that needs to happen with involving your sisters. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a balance of empathy and listening and journeying. So we have many thanks on the chat. I think it's time to give thanks and to prepare ourselves for tomorrow. Lynn, I don't think there's words. Thank you for being so concrete, so wise, and as well to give us the house. Sometimes we are told what to do, what not to do, but right. I think you give us the how to and how to do this. And in every single aspect, you have that little big how. So thank you. I would encourage the sisters to read again the handout that we received. After this session, I will send the handout for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have emotional accompaniment. So I think it's deepening this, taking a selfie again, deepening in what you have done today. So thank you so much. Lynn, I don't know if you want to say something. Yes.
We have the same Zoom.
We have the same link. Again, I will send it again in the email. Okay. I will send the handouts for tomorrow. We'll be here at 2:30 Rome time, yes. Whichever time that is. We ask the translators to be again with us. Thank you so much for the help, for Daniela, Christina, and Marilu. Thank you, Florence, as well, for your presence and help with the technical side. And I really invite you to open the microphones, and if you want to share with us your gratefulness and your words, you're most welcome to do so. Thank you so much to all.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Buonanotte.
Sì.
Mille, buongiorno.
Buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias.
Grazie, mille grazie.
Grazie.
Grazie, domani.
Gracias.
No me permite.